Hello, everyone. My name is Cornelius, and welcome to episode one of this new project I decided I'm working on. I hope you'll stick around as I figure out, how to do this better. So today, what you'll be listening to shortly was a conversation I actually had with a man named Hoodie. He has I think he had a Japanese accent. No, I was one of his friends. I think he had a Guatemalan accent, if I could actually make that out properly. I do believe it was Guatemalan. And then another friend of mine named David, his accent could be described as Welsh. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. Just nothing more to add. Hope you enjoy the show. Hello and welcome. My name is Cornelius, and today I'll be speaking with Hoodie and David. Am I pronouncing that right?
No, it's actually David.
David. Okay, David. All right. So, I'm sure all of you listeners will find that interesting. But first, let's talk about some of our sponsors. I know a lot of our listeners are college students who have a difficult time staying focused and studying, and they don't have enough of an income. I pronounced that wrong. They don't have enough of an income to afford something like Adderall or Ritalin, which is why I 100% am certain you would love meth. I've tried meth myself for about 20 years or so, and I've never felt more focused and energized, all right? Our other sponsors, which I'll name drop throughout the show, are Black Lives Matter, the American Nazi Association, and the National Rifle Association. All right, let's begin the show. How are you fellers doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing well. What about you, David?
I think I'm doing all right.
I'm actually very excited to be on this show. I've heard a lot about it. I'm glad you're starting this thing up.
Thank you.
I look forward to the future.
Yeah, I saw rumors on the Reddit where Donald Trump might be on this in the coming weeks.
Oh, yeah. He actually reached out to me on Twitter. He told me he loves my content and he wants to come on. So if I can schedule, because I.
Oh yeah, I think I remember seeing that, bro. Wasn't that right after you called Joe Rogan a pathetic weasel?
Yeah. I think Joe Rogan could not lift more than me if I was sore.
You think so? You really think so? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the mindset, really.
So you ever tried DMT before?
DMT. Okay, well, I've been considering it a lot because I'm all about opening my mind, right? But I've only ever tried heroin and crack and meth, really.
That's interesting because a few weeks ago, my friend he told me to try some ketamine, and sorry, I have a cough. I slammed 8 grams of ketamine, and I couldn't feel the entire lower body. I thought it was just very eye awakening. I think ketamine really helped me in college.
Yeah, actually, I have a similar story. It was a few days ago. I was kind of bored. I was just looking for a kick, really, and I saw this bottle of NyQuil, right? So I had 1 tablespoon full of NyQuil. Nothing's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
Immediate ego death. Immediately. All right.
Really?
Yeah, and I was transported to space. I talked to an Egyptian person, and he told me about how everything's going to be all right if I just believe. And I really think that's true. You know
what's interesting about Egyptian people, now that you bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the African Americans in America today kind of look up to those Egyptians and they think we were kings and everything. Am I correct in saying that?
I do believe you are correct.
Okay, so the thing is, when the African slave trade started, the Africans that were traded into America were actually not from Egypt. They were from places like Nigeria or places from the west coast of Africa. So I think it's kind of interesting how African Americans today think of pharaohs as their ancestors, when in reality they're really not. And I think it's healthy for them to realize this kind of reality because, yeah, maybe they were related to kings in Nigeria or something, but, Egypt is a place next to Mesopotamia. It's more east, so I think that's just one of the most easy mistakes to make when, I know we're sponsored by Black Lives Matter, so I just want to make that abundantly clear.
And it's weird that they're the only American ethnic group that does so. Like, I feel like Mexicans would be much more closely drawn towards Egyptian.
I have to agree with you because, countries conquered countries, and I recently saw an article that showed the countries with the largest empires in the world, and obviously England was there, and I think it was second or third, but Spain was there. So I think Spain and say Ramses II, they really have some interesting ties. Like anyone from Spain could easily say, I'm related to an Egyptian, while any African American in America, they have less similarities to the Egyptians in Egypt than Spanish people do.
Do you think part of it has to do with regional differences and how they claimed race back then? Because I know in the Roman Empire, I'm an expert on all things Roman, right? I took a class, so basically, there was actually an Egyptian emperor of Rome, and he considered himself Roman. He didn't consider himself Egyptian. Yeah, because Rome would essentially grant citizenship to any country or any land that they took over, and those people would automatically become Roman. Any idea of their past, even the Jews, when the country known as Judea was part of the Roman Empire, a lot of the arguments Palestinians have against Israel being, the Jewish claim to that area of land is that they were actually considered Roman during the time, whereas the Palestinians were sort of outcasts. So potentially maybe there's some maybe black people just kind of identify differently in that sense,
Yeah, it's all very interesting how nationalities and races play a part in our social identities, and I find it interesting how you bring up Israel and Palestine, because I think that issue is so important in today's world that so many people don't know what's happening down there. And personally, I believe in the two-state policy. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to hear your guys' opinions on that.
The two-state. David, do you want to say anything about that?
Forget. Never mind. Well, I agree with the two-state policy as well. I think all of the religious conquest and sort of tribalism going on down there just not right. And I'm not too knowledgeable on the issue, but I feel as though a policy would work the best.
Mm-hmm, yeah, I think I would probably agree. I think generally they're both kind of aggressive towards one another, and Israel is, they do a lot of unprompted attacks, which aren't called terrorist attacks.
I wanted to ask you the question is, do you guys know about the USS Liberty?
No, could you inform me on this?
So, what was that, David? What did you say?
Was that the ship?
That was the ship, yes, and it was attacked by Israeli soldiers. And the interesting about that is no one says it was a terrorist attack. They say it was just an accident, that quotation marks accident. I think that's very interesting, and there's obviously alliances being made with certain countries, which I shall not name, which I think in some sense is not morally correct, but it is history. I believe that history is war, and it's just bound to happen as human nature.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very true. Speaking of Israel, I want to introduce one of our sponsors, the American Nazi Association. All right. Have you ever felt like there was too much traffic on the road you were driving down, right? There's too many people. There's too many bankers. The bankers run the world, right? Well, what if I told you a lot of those people were Jews? What if I told you all of your problems were because of a specific race of people, right? You would want those people eliminated, right? Well, if that's you, I want to clarify if that's you, all right, then the American Nazi Association is perfect for you. You should join, you should put up flyers, you should gas the chambers, all right? Do what you want. Anyway, moving back to the point, what were we just talking about?
We're talking about the Israel-Palestine.
Oh, yes, Israel and Palestine.
I want to move on from that a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
You guys hear about what was that destabilization thing?
David, I cannot hear you.
Jesus Christ, my mic is terrible. Did you guys hear about that one Israeli issue in Egypt where they tried to destabilize Egypt's reputation with the United States because they were considering helping in some conflict Israel had interest in?
Really?
Wait, I didn't know this.
Hold up. Keep talking about some.
All right, yes. Well, I guess I'll just interject some, comedy right now. What did the chicken say to the mama bear?
What did the chicken say to the mama bear? I don't know.
Buck, buck, bro.
well, that's a great joke. That's an amazing joke. I mean, jokes are really the best medicine in the world, I think. I think if people, instead of fighting wars and being sad about things, I think jokes would help a lot. Once, in awkward situations, you can always get out with a simple joke. I mean, I got a joke for you. So there are 3 tomatoes walking down a road, right? One is father tomato, one is mother tomato, and one is baby tomato, right?
Yeah.
They're walking down the road, and baby tomato is kind of lagging behind because he's so slow. His feet are really small. And dad tomato, he gets angry and he goes back there and he says, "Why are you walking so slow?" Baby tomato's, crying. He's like, "My legs hurt." You know what dad tomato does?
What?
He squeezes baby tomato and he says, "Catch up."
Dude, that was probably quite humorous. It was. I laughed more than I'd ever laughed in my life, and I think I've lost my congestion. I've been cured of my cancer. I no longer have Crohn's disease. This is amazing.
You had Crohn's disease before this.
I did. I was actually sitting in the toilet as I was speaking to you.
Wow. Wow. I'm glad that I could have cured you of your disease. I mean, it was a simple joke, and
laughter is the best medicine.
Laughter is the best medicine. And
just goes to show.
People who can't take a joke, I think they should learn how to, because it's just so valuable if you could, take a joke and relax a bit.
Speaking of people who can't take a joke, our next sponsor, Black Lives Matter, all right? So, Black Lives Matter, what do they stand for? If you are someone who doesn't like it when cops shoot black people, and it's something that bothers you, if in your absurd reality that bothers you, something so trivial, then I think that, sorry, I have something in my lungs. I've just ingested a lot of NyQuil. Okay. Sorry. It's just so sad when I find out that black people die sometimes. It's the one race that shouldn't die. Sorry. It's just a topic so near to my heart.
Oh yeah, did you guys hear this one statistic about black people? Actually, it's pretty alarming.
I'm sorry. I just found out that my mom, one of my friends' moms have cancer, so I'm kind of like really sad right now. But I heard the statistic. The statistic is that, black people make up 13% of the United States, but they make up 50% of the crimes. Am I correct in saying that?
And guess what? There's more nuance to that, right? 13% of the crime, 13% of people in the United States are black. Around 50% of them commit the homicide crime. 13% includes men and women. Most of those are men who are committing the crime. So it's actually 7% of the population that commits 50% of the homicide crime.
Huh. So when you say that, are you implying...
On this topic, I just want to remind the audience that Black Lives Matter is one of our sponsors.
Yes, they give us money, and we say what they want us to say. Exactly.
From the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. So I wanted to continue on that thought by saying that only 7% of
so fucking mad right now.
Sorry, that's my roommate. Anyway,
is that Chad?
Yeah, he's French. His name is Chad, and what he thinks is he believes that he also believes that 7% of the population create 50% of the crimes are men. So are you implying that females are incapable of committing crimes? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe they drop a knife in the kitchen and hit someone on the foot and cuts their toe off,
Yeah,
Chad also a proponent of Israel not being a legitimate state?
I believe so. Hey Chad, are you a supporter of Israel being not a legitimate? All right, I believe he is.
Yeah, Chad supports Israel.
Wow.
I didn't really. Wow.
I think there's a lot of unnecessary intervention globally, right? So I don't understand why we should, the United States should have to stop. What's a tragedy? Let's go back in time to World War II.
Okay.
Why did we have to stop World War II?
Slavery, right?
Global warming would be less.
No. We stopped World War II because we wanted to end slavery. You see, the French people, they were being enslaved by the Polish people because the German people were forcing them to do it. And, the Polish people were kind of cucks to that. So they were enslaving every single French person that existed. And Americans, obviously, they are enemies to slavery. Ever since they were established as an independent country, they wanted to stop slavery. So that is why... That is why we nuked
George Washington, who said slavery.
Yeah, exactly.
Quote.
And that's one of the reasons why we nuked Japan, because Japan, they kind of...
Stop talking so loud. You're too embarrassed.
Japan was enslaving the Australians, right?
Yeah, Japan was enslaving the Australians, and one of the
led to the Great Emu War, because the emus were strictly against slavery, and then Japan tried to bomb Australia, but Australia said no, and then the emus flew into Japan, and that's how Hiroshima and Nagasaki got bombed, the emus, man.
So where does Ash Ketchum come into all this? I do believe he's important.
I actually have a big theory on that.
It was Brock Cornelius.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, so...
Brock was the leader of Japan at the time, and he was on the conquest for world domination, and he used this one mechanism that the Japanese had invented at the time called onyx, and he dropped onyx on a United States base in Pearl Harbor, and with that came massive repercussions for the Japanese people. I don't even want to begin to name the atrocities performed on them because of the leader, Brock.
The thing about Japanese people, I actually have I have a Japanese friend, right? And
what?
a Japanese friend, and they still exist. They're not all dead. But the thing is,
wait, Japanese still exist?
Yeah, there's only a few of them around now. But
I've never met one.
Yeah, no, I met this Japanese guy at school, right? And he is one of the most unique people I've ever met. He owns a Jeep, and he drives around when the sun is setting, and it's actually beautiful. He's one of the most beautiful people I've ever met.
Wow.
He's in philosophy, isn't he?
Yeah, no, he's majoring in philosophy. You know, I think what Hiroshima and Nagasaki did is they made them into more peaceful people. And this philosophy friend I have, he's one of the most intellectual people I've ever met.
I actually have a similar friend. His name is Steinayan Herman, and he is.
It looks like Chad has joined the chat.
Oh, hello, Chad.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
It's going well. Oh, Chad, do you want to introduce yourself to the people who are listening at home?
You blatantly insult my people like that? Calling me Chad? Do you know what that's like? It's like calling a black person the N-word. Calling me Chad. Yeah.
Chad,
Think on that for a little while. Goodbye.
Wow.
Dude, you know, sometimes I just think Chad is the most...
I don't think he remembers that we're sponsored by Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I don't know.
Could you relay this information to Chad, please?
Yeah, no, Chad, we're sponsored by Black Lives Matter, so, you know, you can't be saying things like that, all right?
Speaking of black people, our next sponsor is the National Rifle Association, also known as the NRA. Let's say you're
for many black deaths.
Yeah,
which
of course.
is not necessarily a bad thing.
Let's say you're walking around late at night, you see someone, you see an article of clothing, let's say it's a hoodie. Hey there, hoodie, how's it going? Yeah, okay, so let's say you see a hoodie, right? And you can't see the person inside because it's dark. All right, and you can't see black people at night. That's one of their many gifts. It's a good thing, all right? That could be potentially very scary, and you have the right to defend yourself, right? So if you're a member of the NRA, you probably own a firearm, and you should use it.
Exactly.
You know, I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't agree more. And you know what that brings our conversation to? We have to talk about the bump stock ban that Trump did a few months back. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Do you want to say anything, David?
Could you repeat what he banned?
Bump stocks and guns.
Pump stocks?
Yeah, so like if you want to add like upgrades to your guns or whatever. You know?
Essentially, a bump stock makes a semi-automatic fire at a rate that's seemingly automatic. It's not legitimately, but it's
How long is this gun go?
Yeah, you see, because does Chad want to make a point?
I think Chad he's pretty lonely right now, which is kind of interesting actually. I never thought Chad would be lonely.
Chad.
Yeah.
Wait, so Chad, join the call then. Join in on the conversation.
Yeah, Chad, you want to join in on the conversation?
We can turn it
says
into
no?
a convo.
Who's the other guy?
Wow, what a fag. We're also
David.
sponsored by the community. And what I meant by what a fag was what a great person.
I do believe that word stands for freakishly awesome guy.
Yeah, no, he is a freakishly awesome guy. He's a fag.
Wow, I just love I just love how things can be taken out of proportion.
Yeah, I know. And that brings us back to the joke thing. You know, I think everything nowadays in our political climate is just taken way too seriously. I think we need to take a step back and realize
especially
what we're
brutality.
going for. Yeah, you know, police brutality. I mean, it's just a joke. No one really cares about that shit. Am I right?
Has anyone ever died?
Yeah, I don't think anyone has ever died from police brutality. I mean, I watched this movie called The Hate You Give, and it was about black people being killed by police. And I don't know, I was very surprised at how people actually believe in that. I thought it was, you know, kind of just like a fictional story.
Speaking of black oppression, I recently read a book. I'm actually on one chapter away from finishing, and it was like one of the biggest literary works in the conquest for abolition. And in the book, it's an autobiography. The author details his experiences with the white man, and every time he would recount his experience, it was most pleasant. He would talk about how the white man would let his slaves tie him to a stake and then whip him repeatedly as to show that they are not unequal.
You know,
rather
that's
that they have just as much of a right to abuse him
Yeah.
as they have as he has a right to abuse them. And that ties into police brutality because black people nowadays have just as much of a right to shoot that police officer. We're sponsored by the NRA, and guns do serve that purpose. And the police officer, just as much of a right as the police officer has to shoot them. So I just find it interesting that people are talking about this whole inequality issue when in reality it's the same thing.
You know, you bring up a great point. I mean,
Sort of philosophical.
yeah, it is quite philosophical. And, you know, one of my great friends, the Japanese guy, he once said that to think is to know. And I was so very, it was such a profound thing for him to say that. It kind of changed my life.
I had a similar friend named who is also very into philosophy, and I think the one thing he told me that really impacted me more than anything else in the entire world was that, hey, Cornelius, language is an emotion, and if you feel things, you speak a language. And you are literate if you feel. It does not matter if you can read or write. If you can feel, you can speak. And honestly, I've never felt something to such a great proportion before in my entire life.
I have a similar friend who's also heavily into philosophy. He goes by the name, and he once told me that to look is to see. And I just found that so profound because I started looking at things and I started seeing things. I'm sorry, I have a really bad cold. It's like negative 20 degrees.
Yeah, no, it's getting really cold. But yeah, no, bringing it back to the philosophy thing, like I think he has the ability to change a lot of lives, and I think if everyone in the world majored in philosophy, we'd make a big difference because philosophers, they make a big difference in society. You can do away with the doctors, the engineers, the dumb bankers. We don't need that. We need philosophy. That's what we need.
It's all about positive thinking, right?
Yeah.
We need to listen to one another. All right, my friend once told me. All right, he literally told me this. All right, you're gonna think it's like Socrates or something. This is him. This is my friend. He once told me to hear is to listen. I'm honestly tearing up right now.
That's something.
You're a friend that's come up with the most profound realizations that I've ever heard.
Such an immaculate thought can only belong to a godly human being. I mean, who is he if he isn't an angel? Who is he?
I'm crying right now. It's just such a touching thing for him to say. I don't know if I'll think quite as beautiful as what he told me that day. And that's why I believe if we just heard one another, we would be able to hear
listen.
each other.
Yeah.
Yes, and right before you brought up that point, Cornelius, Hoodee brought up bankers, and I just like to take a moment of our time to address another one of our sponsors, the International Holocaust Association. The Holocaust was a terrible tragedy. The Holocaust was a terrible tragedy where millions of people died, and the most tragic part about it was the fact that a lot of people died, and that sucked.
Yeah. I mean, it is a crime of the highest order. I think genocide.
I agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, our next sponsor is actually one close to home, close to my heart. I honestly believe everything they say. They're one of my favorite people out there. They didn't even contact me. All right, I sent them an email to see if they could sponsor me, just because I love what they say, what they stand for so much. It's the Americans Against Homosexuality Association. I truly believe that traditional marriage is only defined as marriage if it's between a man and a woman, and it preserves the sanctity of religion. all right? And if anyone disagrees with me, honestly, stop watching, all right? Because you're not listening. You're not hearing, you're not seeing, you're not looking, you're not feeling, you're not language.
I would sooner see a marriage between a male and a female dog than a male and a male human.
You know, I have to agree with you guys there. I mean, homosexuality is just unnatural.
I mean,
Shouldn't
what's
happen.
next? Are we going to marry our doorknobs?
I remember I used to have a 3-year-old brother, and he told me that he was gay very early on. I killed him.
Oh, yeah. No, I do believe what you just said, David, what you just said is something that I think more people need to do, all right? More people need to try to do this. They need to kill off those they disagree with, all right? Because they're only polarizing society more by disagreeing. If everyone agreed, there wouldn't be polarization, all right? That's the definition of polarization. So I truly believe you did a service to society, all right? And speaking of which, do we live in a society?
This brings conversation.
Hold up.
Bring up
I think
sponsor.
I'm sorry. I think we're gonna have to cut it short here, and for the next episode, we're gonna be talking about if we live in a society or not, because it looks like our time is coming up to an end, and I just want to thank everyone for listening and watching. And if you guys are still here, please subscribe to listen to more of these. We'll be coming out with maybe weekly.
Like the video as well, my friend.
Yeah, we'll be coming out with maybe weekly uploads. This will be put up in Cornelius's YouTube channel, so please like and subscribe.
I'll be
Everyone say
coming up
goodbye.
with my own solo stuff on the channel as well. It'll be called Toilet Talks, and whenever I need to, relieve my bowels, I will be.
Could you please elaborate?
Discussion. And I hope you guys tune in for those. I will be providing a close-up at the end of each episode of my feces. And until next time.
All right, well, let's go.
All right, bye.